Jeg er helt håpløs å snakke på norsk. Beklager. So I'm not going to ask you to translate. I will translate the question, and then you can tell me if I got it right or not. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for turning up. Absolute pleasure. I'm very humbled. My name is Mick. Thank you for the introduction. I was asked through Björn of a comment on a Slack channel to share what I know with all of you. I have worked in Norway, but for the last 10 years I've been a consultant. I'm now working in product for a company called DataStax, which is headquartered in Silicon Valley, San Jose, Santa Clara. Our customers around Apache Cassandra and DSC and Astra database are big tech, big companies, big data in the transactional or application layer. I've also been very involved with open source for a long time, and that also puts me in a lot of contact with a number of the big tech companies which are not our customers. For example, Apple and Netflix and Uber and so on. So what I realized with the conversations was that I had some insight to share, but I'm also very humbled to be here because in many ways I don't feel like I'm an expert on these subjects. I'm just another engineer, consultant, product manager, and just my position puts me in a different place. And also all of this is changing so fast. But hopefully you'll get some value out of what I have to share and say today. And I also hope that an angle of what I have to say will surprise you. Like I said, I am an engineer originally. For the last decade, I have been a consultant, so I know your life. And then the beginning of this year, I got moved into product and VP of product for DataStax, particularly around open source. It sounds fascinating. A lot of that is, in fact, cat herding in the community. We're all difficult people. I've also been involved in open source for a long time, been very passionate about open source, but there's also economic and utilitarian reasons for being engaged in open source and pushing it. I have been a committer. I'm in the top 12 committers for Apache Cassandra and on the PMC, and for the last year I was the PMC chair for Apache Cassandra. All of that said, as I said before, I am not an expert in data science. I'm not an expert in ML. I know how to put together LangChain and embeddings in front of it, but in those technologies, I'm not an engineer. And this is moving, everything is moving so fast that it feels like you take the weekend off and it's completely new on Monday. So when I was asked to give this talk, I was a little bit like, oh, who am I to share? And I'm certain that any of you who are active every day on Reddit and other mediums, staying up to date, you'll know things that I don't. So with that in mind. Generative AI is still taking the world by storm. Anyone who tells you today they know what's about to happen next is bullshitting you. We saw a lot of this coming when Moderna generated the sequence for the vaccine in under 24 hours of when COVID the genetic sequence was published by China. They did that because they had ML throughout their company. They had started a digitalization project 10 years before, and they were a technology company first, not a pharmaceutical company. So that was really, like in many people's minds, the first real application on proof of AI happening. And if you were inside the large language model research circles, you will kind of see the acceleration that happened over the last couple of years. But for most of us, this year with ChatGPT, we kind of went, oh, generative AI has taken a huge leapfrog over predictive ML. And with that comes this massive wave of hype. And everyone's like, oh, your jobs are going to get replaced, and rah, rah, rah, rah, rah. And that's exaggerated for the sake of FOMO. What I want to do is to bring that back down to tangible, concrete wins in everyday life. But just to double click on that point about that this is a massive transformation in our world. Mobile first was big. Now, if you look back at mobile first and the impact it had on our industry, the whole API movement was caused from it. User-centric interfaces, and therefore user-centric data, which was one of the catalysts for the big data movement, comes from the mobile first. What we're seeing with AI today is a transformational change and potential exponential growth at multiple layers. And that's why people are saying this is not mobile first. This is much more akin to the internet and the first time we got the browser. And for most people, the first time they got the browser, it was like, I have no idea what to do with this. I have no idea what it's going to become. But we all kind of had the feeling that this is going to be big. We're in that moment. This will also have a big impact on the tools that we use, but also the apps that we write, how we write them, etc. A snippet from an article last week on how we expect to see companies change, the productivity gains you should be expected to see, is broken down nicely in this table. This is quite conservative. I thought these productivity gains were very baseline. Certainly leaders and coaches in the Valley are talking about 20 to 30% productivity gain is your baseline. And the people who, when you're using GenAI, and the people who are not using GenAI, it's becoming clearer and clearer in the quality of their work. And that they won't, for long, have a job. That we're moving quickly into that point where not taking advantage of GenAI in your everyday work, independent of what role or task you have, is like turning up in the 90s and refusing to use a computer.
What's SDR and BDR?
Sales.
Sorry?
Sales. Now, America's got a pretty brutal work culture. And in a number of companies already, we've seen large layoffs. Some of that was correction after the hiring spree in COVID. But certainly some of it is now from AI. We've seen it in Stack Overflow. We saw it in IBM. It's happened. I've seen it in DataStax. And DataStax saw this coming as well. But it's still happening. Fortunately, in Norway, you have a little bit better workplace regulation. But I think that message should still resonate just as loud. As a worker yourself, if there's a 30% productivity increase to take advantage of, why would you not want to? one of the things that I'm going to talk about is how to take advantage of GenAI. Anecdotally, my career success is largely because of the people that have given me a chance. Lisa gave me a job when I first came to Norway. And the great teams that I've worked with. Bookklubben, Gunnlek and Meyer, Finn, and the culture that I've learnt from Norway. The egalitarian culture of Norway, where you put people first, you see each other, you learn from each other, you work together, is something that I see as critical in this transformation. I think there's an irony here in that for us to be better at taking advantage of machines, the fastest way we can do that is by working with each other as humans. So I think, and part of that is choosing the beginner's path. This came off Reddit. Someone asked them, with your infinite wisdom and knowledge, could you please give me some life advice? And the answer was surprisingly on point. To summarize it, stay curious, keep learning, and embrace change. We're technologists. I think we need to take a step back from this being hype, the whole FOMO, all the jobs are going to be replaced, and just see this as this is what technology does. And when change comes, even if it's a little bit faster than we are comfortable with, lean forward and embrace it. Okay, so jumping into my first example of using hands-on GenAI, which is what we're here for. The context for this is the company that I work for. DataStax does real-time AI. The products that we have, Astra ML, Astra Streaming, Astra DB, they are as a service. They run in any cloud vendor that you want in any region, and all of our knowledge is open source. So our business model is we are the best at operating these things in the cloud, and we can run them anywhere for you and give you the freedom to operate, not just on the cloud vendor, but on the technology, on open source. So we do a lot of both predictive and generative ML, inference engines, feature engineering, large language models, embeddings, and vector. We don't do ML in the analytics stack. Like I said before, and this is something that you see more in big tech, our ML is in the transaction or application layer. Okay, so this year it kind of popped up how important vector search was. As soon as ChatGPT came out, we're like, holy moly. Large language models and GPT is going to be something that we can take advantage of, but getting your domain knowledge and putting it on top and taking advantage of that large language model with embeddings is critical. So we had to have vector search. And we knew we could do it on top of Apache Cassandra. So we got one of our best engineers to do it, and he did vector search in 3 days. And that put us on feature parity with Pinecone. And Pinecone has an evaluation of $750 million. This is kind of scary. Puts us in a great position. We're the only scalable vector database at the moment, I believe. But that engineer's use of GenAI was our wake-up call, and he's done a number of webinars internally based on how we used Copilot. What he said was that all the boilerplate stuff, understanding code, the libraries that he was using, and creating strawmans, like going out there and intentionally creating stuff that you know that will be wrong. But at least that straw man is kind of a reference point for you to keep moving and figuring out what it is that's actually going to work, is invaluable. And he saw it as the next level IDE, which is kind of like a simple, mundane way of putting it. It's like if you go from plain text, you go from a simple editor to an IDE, you'll see 20 or 30% productivity increase. If you go from IDE to using Copilot, you'll see a 20, 30%. The problem is we don't actually know how, and I'll jump into that in later examples. What we're also seeing is a clear correlation between the best engineers and their productivity gains. Vector search was written by Jonathan Ellis, and he said it easily made him 200% more productive. He's one of our best engineers. That's kind of scary, but alas, I wouldn't give up hope. I don't think it's about intelligence. I think that it's the way that those engineers are results orientated and structured in their method. And that these are the types of engineers where halfway through a job, if you were to ask them, hey, I've got 2 people here that can help you out, can they jump in? The process of tackling a problem is already structured enough that components can be delegated out and so the other person can take in. And this is the same thing that we saw through his webinars, that the things that he was getting Copilot to do were things that were easily delegatable, and the simple stuff. There are other tools out there. This is a short list of things that I know that developers at DataStax have tried and are using. What we've seen is that you've got to use your own money and time. There is a cost to learning something new, and you may not be given the time at work, and you may not be able to expense the subscriptions. But everything is moving so fast, it is worth spending your own money on a monthly subscription to figure it out. It is worth spending your own time to figure it out. In the list, what we've seen so far, Claude, it's not very good quality. It's like GPT-3. It's fast, it's got a nice UI, it's got a bigger context window, which is useful, but you can get around that with GPT. With all of these tools and the generative landscape at large, it's constantly changing. Even GPT-4 was great, and it's gotten worse. The same with Find. You'll find one tool is really awesome and then it gets popular and then saturated and then it's not so good. At the same time, with a lot of these tools, if it's slow giving you an answer, that often means it's going to give you a better answer. So it's a bit tricky. It's like, is this tool saturated and just gone to crap? Or is it just figuring out a better answer for me? When it comes back with immediate answers, they're often like the ones which are rubbish. I don't believe you can learn even the code GenAI tools solely by themselves. I think the best way to do this is with an open mind and looking at all of the GenAI tools out there. Even as an engineer, communication, presentations, creative thinking is part of your job. There are a lot of GenAI tools out there, and if you just try and break it up and look for the little mundane wins, you'll quickly find productivity. But again, you've got to explore. You've got to learn. There's a sunk cost involved. What I've found is that in my day-to-day, like the boilerplate code, I don't spend all my time engineering anymore. That's one of the sad truths about becoming a coach or manager or getting responsibility in the workforce. But there are lots of things on the side which are not really where your focus is. And when you're pushed and you to deliver stuff, that's where the quality suffers. And that GenAI is really good at raising the level of all of those auxiliary things, which at the end of the day only makes your primary deliverable look better. Another challenge is there's no one approach or solution for everybody, even in the same position and even in the same task. You've got to figure out what your weaknesses and strengths are. For me, I know that I am weak on structure and method. I suffer from a blank page problem. And so I'll often use ChatGPT to write up an article, a report or something. And I'll look at it and I'll giggle and I'll go, that's complete rubbish. But I'm starting to write and correct it already. I'm already an hour or two in front of where I would be. Critical thinking and defining the context are crucial. We know this. There's also been, like I hear in the media, people talk about the new job will be prompt engineering. And I think that's nonsense. I think that all of us have got to figure out how to do good prompts. One of the best ways you can do this, I've found, is using ChatGPT with your kids. I had an 11-year-old who wanted to write something, and she used Google. And I thought, why don't you use ChatGPT? She was like, what's that? So I sat down with her and just used ChatGPT. And the first thing she wrote, she was like, okay, write a happy birthday message to my cousin. And ChatGPT gave this 2-page essay about how wonderful her cousin was. And I was like, okay, it's missing context. And the kid's like, what's that? I was like, say you're 11 and that your cousin 11, and then just slowly provide more and more context. Defining context and critical thinking is a critical part of education. And I found that a wonderful experience, both to understand how to teach her and help her, but also how to enable her with technology. This is a good example. Repeat 5 times the experiment of providing a Fermi estimate with 6 steps on how much data is globally stored in Cassandra. So I've set myself up there to avoid failure because it's a Fermi solution. And if any of those 5 experiments are really gone whack, I know how to cut them out. Again, if you'd asked me to come up with a number on how much data was stored globally, I wouldn't have the faintest. And I would have spent hours Googling. Here's some other examples that I've used ChatGPT for recently. So with vector search, it came out in preview yesterday. This week we've been testing it like crazy. I wanted to load some larger CSV vector files into it. Didn't know where I could get some real data. Where can I find vector CVS data sets? Then I was like, well, how can I, what I found didn't really have the embeddings. I was like, well, how can I generate the embeddings? Again, if you know what you're doing, this is really obvious, but I don't. And I've found that now, and this is particularly relevant for consultants, it doesn't matter the language anymore. It doesn't matter the task. I can just go from anybody's task and to anybody's language and figure it out really quickly. Here was one, the bug in Debian packaging in Cassandra. Source tarball inside our Debian deb files was way too big because it was including the Git subdirectory. This is something that I am an expert on. But I couldn't quite, if you've ever done Debian packaging, it's a bit arcane. And I couldn't quite figure out how, from the outside of the Debian packaging interface, how to get that, exclude this folder through to the internal tar command that eventually uses. And I was thrashing around. And I was like, okay, I'll just go ask ChatGPT. And it gave me the perfect answer that was so obvious and I would never have found it. I saved myself hours then and there. Working on trying to figure out how much does a Circle CI run in Cassandra cost. We have 50,000 tests in Cassandra. So that Circle CI YAML file is very large. There's like 1,000 containers I found out, split among different test types. I needed to do a cost analysis, and I was like, oh, this will take me ages to do the calculation through all this YAML. Just pasted it in, it gave me the numbers. Again, I've done the estimate of the ratio using a Fermi solution. Okay, my boss asked me, the chief product officer, he doesn't ask things of me often, usually left alone, which is a nice thing. And when he does ask me of something, it's usually a complete torpedo from the side. He says, like, Mick, I really need you to write a competitive intelligence report on Cassandra, relevant for today. I need to present this to the CEO tomorrow. I'm like, what the fuck is a competitive intelligence report? I was like, I have never done this before. I'd moved into this role, I think, 2 weeks beforehand. Again, used ChatGPT. I could have gone to Wikipedia and read it up, and fair enough, but I was like, no, I'll use ChatGPT first. It wrote the report. Straight away, I understood what a competitive intelligence report was. I understood the structure of the report, and I could see all the content was nonsense. But this content, I could fill out myself. That was the easy part. Other examples, analyze your bank statements. Put your bank statements in and say, is there any fraudulent activity? Where can I save money? I've heard of examples of very large, like gigabit data dumps with no data labeling or headers being put into ChatGPT and saying, what's this data? It's like, this is the battery life degradations of different models of electric cars over the past 5 years. Like, just phenomenal. And again, soundboarding and proofreading. Some tips. It is better at popular languages like Python and Java. If you prefix a prompt with "as an expert," it will give you a 20% better answer. I kid you not. The same thing, you can ask it to write something and you say repeat, but to avoid AI detection. And it will. Use the session. So if you've got something that's too big for the context window, just say the only thing you're allowed to answer, like I'm going to feed you in a document chunk by chunk, you're only allowed to respond next until I tell you I'm finished. So that way you can get large contexts, large questions in. Loop and reflection. Using OpenAPI and the plugins, you can write code and get it to run it, and then test it, and then ask it to test that own fake or virtual server of the code it's running. This is a real game changer. Again, watch out for saturation, the different tools, and don't paste sensitive, confidential data. I've had these conversations with consultants before as well. They were pasting the GC Java logs into GC Easy from a customer. And I was like, have you gotten permission from the customer? And they're like, oh, but there's no sensitive information in that GC log. I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's not your data. You need to get clearance with the customer before you go and paste it into a public website. So yeah. Okay. Those last two slides, this slide here, and this is where I go to culture, comes from a workshop that we did in DataStax. So leadership understood that this was important and to get us up and running faster. And so we have been running both webinars and people who have shown success, but we also have been doing workshops, both in the leadership team and within individual teams, where we say that we get everyone to do a slide like this. Share what you've found. Share what works for you. A few examples that I've got. So this came from someone in PR. Strategy, ideation, feedback, soundboarding, so similar stuff to what I had. And she's even put down planning vacations and trips. And I have since copied that one. I think it's a great idea. These slides I will share afterwards. I know I've put a lot of text on some of them. Another example, examples of questions, prompts. What is the definition of cognitive capital? Summarize all the literature on it. What are the most widely cited economic papers? This is an interesting one, particularly with Microsoft Edge, that you can get research papers and you can just say summarize it in 3 paragraphs for me. As an expert in a field, that allows you to go through 1 or 2 research papers every morning. That's quite phenomenal. Again, so on. Okay, so I'm going to jump back out again, and I want to spend a few minutes on the landscape and what's changing around just the use of GenAI for tooling, because I think this is important, and I think it helps to make things a bit more tangible for us. And I think as we get better with the tools at our fingertips, we get more empowered in the changing landscape around us. So I've talked about AI Assist. We are seeing the Gen AI and predictive AI now coming together. This is going to be more and more important as those large language models are served to us, but we're trying to get domain data on top of it. AI agents, and then autonomous agents. Now, with the AI agent, something I wanted to share quickly was, if you go, like when we released vector search this week, and at the same time we also dog fooded it. We put a little chatbot into it. So once you log in and you create a database, and you go in here, I can't actually find it at the moment, but I can. It is there. It's called Intercom. The chatbot does embeddings. It looks up our vector search, and then it hits up the large language model. So you can write stuff like write me an app on top of Astra to create a to-do list app for me. So we've got our own generative AI chatbot running inside the Astra console. And there's a really nice feature to it in that if you add square brackets debug to the end of the prompt, it will actually print out the embeddings and the vector search and then the lookup. So you can see how we put those things together in the request. And it's all built on, like I said, we do open source, Cass.io. So cassio.org. Autonomous agents, interesting. Autonomous agents is when both the definition of the task can be given. It will come up with a plan for execution, and then go and execute it itself with its feedback and learning loop. This has significant impacts everywhere. Has significant impacts on every layer. What we see, I'm going to jump past this page, but we can see that it's not just about AI beside the stack. It's not just about AI in the stack. What we're seeing is data structuring and transformation is becoming cheap, if not commoditized. The impact of that is where the disruption comes out in the industry. What we're already starting to see is a new type of application development happening. This won't remove all of the jobs. the way we do it today will still exist. You look at a terminal at the flight counter at the airport, and they're still using COBOL systems. So some of that hype and FOMO is kind of overdriven, but we will see more of this happening. And an example of that is kind of thinking about what digitalization really means. Digitalization is not the automation of tasks into the digital world. Digitalization is getting analog data to digital. Once it's digital, the structuring and the transformation of that can be left to machines with help. That's the game changer. This shows it's a lot more complex than that. One of the critical things about this is the importance of getting the ML people and the data scientists into the application stack. We have been doing data scientists a disfavor by keeping them in the back room. Data mesh is a principle that comes in to address that. But it's both, and if you've been paying attention to Conway's law, it's not just the organizational change, it's a technological change. When you get ML into your application stack, then you can do ML on top of ML. Then you can do feedback loops. Then that's when the AI kicks in. When we think about data coming into the system, not all data needs to go into a database. We have data that may only have a time to live that's within the retention time of a stream. And your application stack, if designed well, should do event-driven architecture. So we can live in a world of small data a lot of the time. We think of big data as because we have to copy all of that data somewhere else. I've heard someone say the only feature that Snowflake or Databricks actually has is it takes all your money to copy your data or duplicate your data. The developers like to say, oh, we're only in Norway, we've only got small data, we won't need to scale. And when they're saying that, they're completely ignoring data science. It's like scale isn't just about the amount of data you've got, it's about who are the consumers of that data. And can those consumers hit up your application systems? At the same time, just like we saw with microservices and bounded contexts, we're moving to a world of more small data. We have large language models that we can use, and so the data with embeddings can actually be much smaller to provide the same value. The point that I was coming to was the data scientists need to come in, the ML engineers need to come into the application stack, because when we talk about what is the time to live on that data, what is the value on that data, they're the ones to decide that, not the application developers. Okay, so looping it back, you're going to have to play to find your 30% increase. You're going to have to think outside the box. You're going to expect to sink 10% of your time getting there. You may have to use your own money and time. There's a lot to win by making a group exercise. If you're a coach or a leader, organize workshops, organize sessions, get people together and sharing ideas. Try and break it up into small, tangible wins. Culture is critical. An egalitarian spirit is an expression of utilitarian love. I have also figured this out I think of myself as a decent engineer. One of the most rewarding things I've done in life is throwing myself into the Cassandra community. In the Cassandra community, I'm surrounded by better engineers than me. It has been a struggle, but it's where I've learnt the most and found the most satisfaction. If we can approach GenAI and learning it the same way, I think we will win. Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, you just mentioned some predictive and generative AI. What's exactly the difference?
So generative AI is, again, I'm not an expert, but large language models,
Maybe I should ask ChatGPT.
you do that. Predictive ML is the ML that you've been working with, most people have been working with for the last 10 years. So all of your, all of the, predictive ML can be both batch ML and real-time ML, but training a model and the inference engine and then the lookup of it. You may put feature stores on top of it. Those feature stores may be computed, so you're stepping into feature engineering, but that's still your predictive ML. There's also, especially with Cassandra users, a lot of Cassandra data is in fact predictive applications. People just don't realize it. Generative AI is just generating something from scratch, and up until this year, with large language models, if you were playing around with them 2 years ago, it was like they just repeat words at you, like it was just complete junk. No one believed in them. I saw a local data scientist do a seminar last year, and it was obvious, it was just a large language models and generative AI was still a research project. It didn't entirely dismiss it, but you could see that it didn't have faith. And that's the whole industry. We've all been focused on predictive ML, and that's changed this year. Sorry, lame answer, best I could do.
ChatGPT is very good at generating things when they are available in the training sets and actual. But when you ask it something that it doesn't know anything about, it can generate quite a bit of gibberish. Just typing, tell me about, and typing.
Yeah, it will hallucinate.
And it will lose it. It will tell you that you're a professor and has published this and that.
Yeah.
So how do we need to be critical of it, but do we also see it getting better at stuff like that?
Yes, you can get it to fact check itself, and that helps. But it's the same conversations I've had with the kids. It's no different to Google search. Google search will give you mostly bullshit, but no one dismisses the value of Google search. It's just people AI is a loaded term. So people are expecting something, and it wasn't actually that. It really is just a dumb robot. And until you create that relationship, you won't find the value in it.
As an engineer, I think, or hope at least, that I'm providing some of the quality check of these generative AIs.
Yeah, you've got to be the one in charge. But with the repetition, it's about framing it so that the Fermi solution is the answers to the individual steps. I didn't need to fact check because the whole point was ballpark estimates were going to work for me. So I could kind of sidestep that problem. Yes.
What's interesting is this saturation problem you mentioned. Can you explain a bit more about what it is and why it happens?
Just too many users on a system.
So it's just
It's just businesses. It's just all these startups trying to get your attention, building apps the new way, and they work fantastically, and then they get popular, and then they need to scale their systems up internally, and that takes time, and you come back and you hit them, and it's just like, well, this was awesome last week, and it's turned to rubbish this week. So that's what I mean by saturation, that the systems behind these tools are just other people's companies, and the chaos and mess that you experience in companies, it exists everywhere. So that's really all I meant by that.
I think you just called it a dumb robot, but and I've been playing around with ChatGPT and I've seen explanations that it's not intelligence. It's really good at figuring out what the next word should be, and to me that sounds weird because it's so astonishingly useful and in so many different contexts. So I was hoping that with your insight, how would you explain it to me? How does it work?
Okay, I'm going to try and sidestep that question. You know that ChatGPT works better when you're doing programming tasks. Yeah, so the more structured the content that it's working against, the better the answer it's going to give you. And I think that's a key to kind of solve these limitations. Again, like boilerplate code or like the competitive intelligence report. Like I could see at first glance, like it just as a dumb robot just filled out a structure, but it created a structure that was completely new to me, and I could quickly fact check. But it put me miles in front of where I was otherwise going to be that day. Yeah.
Do you think this generative AI will change the passion in programming languages and frameworks? Because now boilerplate is much easier to generate because the passion in programming languages has been to remove boilerplate code and to use conventional ways. Do you think this will change the way you want to structure?
It's a really good question. And anyone who has confidence in answering that question is bullshitting me. I see, and examples of my uncertainty. You know, when this first came out, I was like a little bit of like, oh shit, this is big tech going to become even bigger. Large language models, ChatGPT, concentration of power, concentration of data, concentration of users and attention. And I'm not sure if I said it, one of the reasons that I'm here was because of my insight with big tech. I feel I have a desire, and I feel also kind of a moral obligation to share that, because big tech is running with a massive advantage in front of us. But where I was wrong there, and a lot of people were wrong, was that the large language models, LangChain, in a matter of weeks became open sourced. You can now run GPT on a mobile phone. Like it's just like all those expectations, like this will only belong to big tech, got quickly swept away. So it's hard to say. Another example of that is people say, well, what jobs are most at risk or going to change because of this? And people will say data scientists because of the example of the CSV file, and just structure this data for me, transform it for me. Education and teachers, health system, linguistics. But I also curious there, because wherever there's a massive transformation in a role, that's often where, and there's a commoditization effect, that's often where there will be the most value created. And when there's value created, there'll actually be more jobs there. So I don't think the data scientists are actually going anywhere. I think that that's what I was trying to get at. The data scientists are actually going to become far more important because of this change, despite our first reaction to it. As far as the apps go, we know that the popular languages and the popular programming problems that you will find on the internet already, which is what large language models take advantage of, are the ones that get commoditized or easier first. I have seen people write up front-end websites using Copilot very quickly. So again, I would bring it back to the digitalization of data is the platform, and then how do you put large language models and vector search with embeddings and these things on top of that, so that you're no longer doing the manual data structuring and transformation, the automation of the task yourself. The languages, the coding that you're doing is more about enabling these tools on top of the data you've got. Yeah.
You talked a little about it, that you have to be careful to not give away sensitive data. A lot of clients or employers is very afraid of you're not allowed to share anything, even your code or something. If you're working on an open source hobby project, that's not a problem. Do you think that will be much of a disadvantage to make it difficult to use this AI thing, because you have to be careful and use time to think of what you can share and what you don't can share with it? Is that a factor in some kind?
Another great question. I think the industry is going to address that faster than we expect. I think like there are tools out there already that will guarantee privacy of what you paste. I don't think there's any technological reasons why ChatGPT isn't protecting that, but it's more about trust and more about moving so fast that there are leakages. Like we got out early on, we got leakage that OpenAI was using Cassandra. We kind of figured out what the technology is behind there. But that wasn't intentional, and they've since hardened it up. Changing landscape. You're going to have to spend time figuring it out, staying on top of it. And yes, if you're working with open source code, you're at a massive advantage. Yes?
You can see that generative AI clearly makes developers more productive. Is there a danger that we become so good at producing massive amounts of code that we hardly understand ourselves, that we end up with kind of a maintenance problem down the road when we produce all this stuff? Some of the production productivity gain will be lost from the chaos.
Yes. One of the reactions I had, like there was a meme that came out a month or so ago about how you can write code so much faster with Copilot or whatever, but you may save yourself an hour writing the code, but you now spent 4 hours trying to debug it. And my reaction to that was as an engineer, you need to be proficient at reading someone else's code. If you can't read someone else's code, there's a bigger problem there. And if you break the task up, and so the code that is generated, you can read it, and you're in charge, you quality check it, we shouldn't have that problem. But that's asking for a maturity level that we don't always see in companies. And that's why I answered yes. Yeah.
Maybe that's an answer to her question. What kind of language will we end up with? The ones that we can read easily and understand, maybe. Doesn't matter how fast you can write them, but how fast you can read them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And sorry I didn't answer that in that way. Absolutely. Yeah.
You said you don't think there's a risk of jobs for engineers, but don't you think when you can produce more code easily and also take all the mundane parts out of writing code out of the equation, because you have all that stuff generated, it's going to be a higher need for like really developers, and the more general run-of-the-mill developers may find it harder in the future.
The risks that again, I'm just, my opinion, the risks that I see are equity separation, like exactly what you said, those who have a better education, those who have the privilege to keep relearning and upskilling are the ones who will benefit. At a society level, that's problematic. It's very positive to see globalization and the programmer world open up to the world, and basically that enablement of no matter where you are in the world. We do remote work now, and if you're smart, you can step to it. And this introduces new challenges there. I think so long as you've got that privilege and you are keen to keep learning, there's no problems there. Where things become cheaper and automated, there's only more value created. So I don't, fundamentally, not concerned with that. I'm concerned about, like, when you start thinking about Boehmer's cost disease. I think I've pronounced that correctly. It's not so much that the tasks have become automated and that there will be value created. It's that the tasks automated in the commercial sector, the commercial value, the commercial entities will drive the value creation of it. But how do we get this transformation and benefit happening in the education system and in the health system and in these other places in society which are still trapped behind this man hours or person hours problem? And we're not willing to invest to get that data digitalized and to kind of get them, and there is no commercial reason for us to do that. And I can see that pulling apart there, and the health system and the education system only becoming comparatively more expensive over time. Yeah.
I got one. Doesn't work anymore. I got one from my email here. I'll just read it up. As an amateur on modern LLMs, I've noticed that they occasionally lie or hallucinate. When we apply this to software development, increasingly outsourcing larger chunks of code to LLM, I guess that will lead to developer bugs or deeper bugs not easily discovered by mere humans. If you assume that the code to be syntactically correct and logically coherent, then errors are of semantic nature. Will the near future consist of giving instructions, getting generated code, and using ages to deep debugging? Does this really save time? Or maybe writing instruction and tests is all we are going to do?
Was that one question?
That was one question. For a little while.
Did I fail to say how bad my memory is? Engineering principles matter. Having a property security policy and practice in place in your engineering of the whole stack matters. Having chaos testing in your platform matters. You do all of those things and addresses the problems. I don't believe AI will create more obscure bugs than that guy you employed 3 years ago for 3 months and then left and nobody understood what the hell they were doing. Same problems repeat. Did that answer? And to the question of large language models and hallucination, and you touched on as well before, that is why vector search is so important. Because the embeddings, particularly around the domain data that you have, is what helps prevent the hallucinations. Yeah.
Just a comment to the, like, oh, is it someone else?
No.
A comment to the question, because, yes, ChatGPT or generative AI doesn't have to stop there. You could ask it to debug the code. You can ask it to create test cases for the code.
Yeah,
You can
exactly.
leverage the generative AI in all the tasks you do, actually.
And that's what we see in the platforms. When you start, like, in the feature stores, you see kind of a bit sometimes expert rule systems. And on top of the inference engines, we see kind of like what's been referred to as a blender pattern. Like, what inference engine will I use based on this, the features, or should I, like, how should I weight different inference engines? And particularly in real-time ML, this is becoming more and more. And then, like, feature stores become computated, and then once you start using inference engines in the computation of the feature store, like, then you get this recursion. And you've got to think like that. You've got to think what happens when you put the feedback loop in there. What is it? Google Translate hasn't employed anyone for over a decade. They've just set it all up and it just runs. So yes, if you engineer something properly, it can, and you understand the security tasks and the chaos testing tasks, and like you understand at an organizational level everything that has to happen, then yes, you can set up something and then walk away from it. Google Translate is a pretty simple requirement specification, and it has the data coming in to self-learn. Yeah.
Yeah, it ties in nicely with the previous question. So the engineer getting the 200% speed up from the implementation of research in Cassandra. Like, what part of the process was that? Like, as you said, there was an internal webinar that explained a bit. What does that encompass? Is that the whole cycle, not just the implementation, but also the testing bit? Or could you summarize that?
I think he said that he would have easily, he would have easily spent 2 weeks coding on this. He's a phenomenal programmer. I talk about culture and working together, and he's one of those engineers that's so good you don't ever want to be in a team with, because you won't get any sleep. He talked about, like, when he started the problem, he wasn't too sure how to tackle it. And so he did ask Copilot to do it from scratch. It generated complete rubbish, but he used that as a blank page problem to then go, okay, no, I've got to do it. Again, productivity again there. Breaking it up into small, it's not just one big 200%, it's pieces here and there. All of the boilerplate code. Like, so to do vector search in Cassandra, we needed a new type in the database, the vector, which is just basically a fixed length array of float 32s. But we needed the serialization of it to happen fast. We couldn't just use it like, do it less. So you needed to create a new type there. But implementing a new type, we've already got lots of types, so Copilot was actually quite good at just kind of figuring that out. Some of the lower level stuff and bugs, he didn't get help with. I think there was a problem with around the vectorization, the low-level optimization. And once he hit that, and he kept on asking Copilot, and it just gave him these long-winded nonsense answers. So, okay, I'm already down at a specific enough, hard enough problem here. I'm taking like these 3 lines of code. Forget it. This is what I do. But there were hundreds of lines here, there, and everywhere, putting it all together, writing tests that just got pumped out for him. Did that answer the question? Yeah. No more questions? Thank you. It's been a massive pleasure.
Oya,
Naam brother.
kama kawa.
Kama kawaida.
Safi.
Safi.
Unaijua Sansina?
Sansina nimelisikia ili Sansina.
Eh.
Nilimnyama jipya ili limnyama ni hatari.
Ya
Ikikuja
kugua liko wapi hilo?
Liko kwenye hii misitu hii.
Misituni ndani huko.
Yeah, I heard of this guy, Sunsin. He's a football player, am I right? Who played like an attacker in the next World Cup. Dude, I'm a huge fan of him.
Yes, Sunsin is a good pesticide for potato beetles.
What did you think about Sensen?
Oh yes, Sensen. I like Sensen a lot. Even I have an upgraded Sensen on my bike. Look at Sensen here.
Sensen. İşte bu sensin.